Hello, my name is Elena Mahoney Sanchez. I am a Spanish artist based in Barcelona, and I'm thrilled to be part in this new sketchy challenge, 30 Faces 30 Days Watercolor Edition. I'm going to be sharing the process of 3 different portraits in watercolor. Starting out with a already made drawing, I want you to take it slowly. I always say a good painting requires a good drawing, so make sure you have a good base before you get started with the actual tutorial. I would say what we are paying most attention to in this paintings are the palette, the color palette. I think my portfolio is mostly identified by the amount of color and saturation that I use, but we are also gonna try and translate the colors that we actually see in the reference picture. So a little bit of both, a little bit of intuitive palette, but also kind of respecting the realism of the reference picture. So yeah, in this particular image we are facing a very contrasted image. I believe that what we need to understand before we start painting is trying to identify where the deepest and the lightest values are, and in this case I think it's pretty easy to see, so hopefully it's nice and easy for starting out. I hope you enjoy the reference picture, and let's get started. I'm starting out with the drawing already done. I've used this red pencil. It's not a pencil, but I don't know how I say it in English. It's a very thin, fine line. Make sure not to use too much pressure when you're using watercolor paper. In this case, I'm going to be using Artist 100% cotton 300-gram cold press watercolor paper. It is a lot of information, but it's very specific. This is my favorite watercolor paper, and I think the only thing that I don't like about it is that it's not purely white. It's more creamy, and it doesn't feel like that much difference, but when you're using a tinted paper, not tinted but not pure white paper, the colours will show a little bit less saturated. And for my watercolours I am using my Schminke watercolour. I'm not sure if it's Academia or there was another kind of brand with Schminke. I don't know, I've been using this brand for over 4 years and I'm pretty satisfied with it. So the materials we're going to be using are 3 brushes. I've got started with this round brushes very early in my career. I think they're the most affordable and useful brushes. And then I'm gonna use for certain parts of the portrait this square flat brush. I can do a lot of details with this big brush because, as you can see, it has a very small point, but I'm going to make sure to have every precise little detail made with this brush. So I got my palette cleaned. Obviously the water, and this is very essential, a absorbent material. It can be paper cloth, any kind of tissue, a sponge, and what I mostly use is paper towel. So I got my palette clean. You can start with whatever sort of palette you want. I recommend having it nice and tidy because it will get dirty, your colours will get dirty, and it's going to be a bit confusing to work with what we already have. Okay, let's get started. So I picked this reference picture because I think it's very versatile. It has a lot of nicely contrasted shadows. So I'm going to start with this round big brush, and well, actually I think I'm going to start with the flat brush, and we're going to do a full layer of this sort of coral orange just to have a base. So we're going to mix some red. I'm actually going to have to clean my yellows because they're pretty green. They're very dirty. What I like doing with my palette is to divide warm colours and cold colors. So here I'll mix reds, oranges, pinks, and yeah, overall warm colors. And here I'll try mixing more the cold version, more blues and more purples and greens. Because this picture is in a warmer, has a warmer tone, I think I'm going to use 3 for the warm and 1 for the cold. Even using this one as a in-between, like purple, something like that. So let's get the perfect color for the base. Make sure to use a good amount of paint for this first layer. We don't want to get, like we rather have more than less that we need. Que sobre que falte in Spanish. I think we need a bit more pink undertone. Okay, I have this pipeta, I don't know what's the name called in English, basically just to pick water faster and bring it to the palette. Okay, this is looking very orange. I'm actually going to pick the side to do any swaps that I need. Or actually I'm going to grab like another piece of paper, just one sec. Okay. Gonna use a bit more yellow. Okay, I'm pretty fine with it. I'm gonna do the full face, even the hair, because we want a unified undertone for the whole face. Gonna keep putting my brush in water because I still think it's a bit darker than I wanted it to look. Try and work as fast as you can with this first layer because once it's dry, we'll get some edges that I'm not looking for at the moment. I think I'm not going to do the neck. I can't really afford doing a whole painting, I think. I only have like 1 hour and a half, and the way I paint with watercolors, it's a very slow and I don't know, I need a lot of time to have my watercolors finished, so I think I'm going to focus only in the head and the features, I guess. Okay, now very important, if you're not happy with this layer, if you think it's a bit too light or a bit too dark, well, I can't really do anything about it when it's too light, when it's too dark, but if you think it's too light, make sure the layer is already dry before you go on top with a new layer, because if you add more water into this layer of paint, which is already still not dry, it will sort of smudge everything. I don't know, it just would look really weird. I know that a lot of people like watercolor because it's spontaneous and it's a bit wild when you add the amount of water necessary for it, but I think it's making it a bit too unexpected. So I rather work with a less amount of water for it to be more predictable. So yeah, I'm gonna let it dry. Make sure it's completely dry, even though you touch it and you feel it's dry. The paper, it's still like humid, so you make sure to leave it you leave it enough time. Okay. Now back to this. Let's start with this round brush. I'm gonna start, obviously, I think I'm gonna start by the nose. I've got at the moment a feeling that I want to pay more attention to the nose because it's the center of the face, I think. Okay, as you can see, I tried to use too much water, so I'm just gonna get rid of the excess. A very easy way to get rid of it, it's just cleaning the excess water out of your brush and just dabbing it like this. It will suck everything. I'm gonna use less water. I'm gonna do a red base. And I'm trying to internalize, because I am afraid that you can't really go back to a mistake you've done in watercolor. Every time I paint and I think that the stain, it's too saturated or too vibrant or too dark, I always struggle and decide if I should erase it before it dries or if I just should trust my gut. And something that you need to understand, it's when the paint is wet, the stain will look much more saturated than what it actually is gonna end up looking. So yeah, no problem when you think the stain is too saturated, it will turn out less vibrant than you expect. So I'm trying to do a general stain here for this shadow underneath the nose. Almost painted the lips. You need to make sure to respect the lightness of the top lip. Something that I really like doing in this first steps of the painting is when you're doing a shadow, like a surface, one first layer of a shadow, I like picking one color as a base, but then slowly using different colors, like I'm doing so with the green and the orange. Even though I was using a very warm red for the shadow here, I'm trying to use a ochre greenish color for the gradient, so that, as you can see, once it's dry, you have an even, nicely blended surface with different colors. Okay, I've used way too much water, so I'm doing that dry brush technique, just getting the excess water out and then just touching the water. Okay, for the nose, for the shadow from the nose, I think I'm gonna use ochre as a undertone. It makes sense to use a ochre or yellow for an undertone of a shadow because yellow is one of the lightest colors when it comes to value. What I mean by value is, well, I try to explain this in one of my Patreon classes, but basically when you're comparing different saturations, like you describe a color with chroma or tone, saturation and value. It seems like the three aspects of a color are independent one from another, but I realized very recently well, I didn't realize, I was practicing it, but I didn't realize the theory behind it. Basically, depending of the saturation and the like the tone, the color will have a deeper or lighter value. So when you're comparing red, blue and yellow, the lightest color, independent of the value, is normally the yellow. So when you pick a same saturation with a same value, it would look much darker in the blue version than in the yellow version, and that's how we kind of understand what I'm trying to say, that yellow normally has a lighter value compared to blue. That's why when you're doing undertones and when you're doing shadows, I like starting out with a yellow, because starting with a yellow, it's very easy to warm it or to make it look colder. And in this case, all the painting has a yellow undertone, so it's really no challenge, no risk with it. Obviously, don't go super overboard with the yellow. We don't want it to look super saturated. That's why I chose a ochre rather than a lemon yellow. Here I'm just trying to darken up certain areas of shadow. I'm using a magenta for more deeper parts of this general shadow. Like for example, here just in the corner of the bottom eyelid. As you can see, it's pretty a harsh shadow, but there still is a pinkish under, like a gradient. That's why I'm just gonna mix pure pink. Getting it pretty watery just to go lighter with it. Here, because we have a clean edge of yellow, I don't want to have that very distinct line. I don't know if you can just see it, but when you have a dry stain and you go on top with another layer on top, you will make the edge look like a line. That's why I want to go and smooth it with my brush. Not too harsh, because I don't want to get the roughness of the paper off. That's a thing you need to understand with watercolors, with watercolor paper, sorry, is that you can't really overwork it too hard. For example, here we're talking about a cotton paper, and I'm using a very smooth brush, but instead of using this brush, we were using a rougher, brittle brush, it was most likely damage the paper. So yeah, try using soft bristles with watercolor paper, just in case. Okay. I realized that here the pink, I'm not really blending it too well, so I'm just going to go on top. I'm not saying you shouldn't work the area, I'm saying you need to be careful with it. Okay, now it looks too blended, but we'll work on it in a minute. Here I think it's going to happen the same thing for the rest. I think I created a very harsh edge, and it's fine, but I think we need to blend it out a little bit. We'll go on top with it afterwards, just to create that distinguishment between both, but we still need some gradient without the harshness of that line. starting out with a bit of pink for the blush.
I want to apologize for all the grammar mistakes I'm gonna be making. English is not my first language, and I think that I speak better than
a bit too far.
I am actually speaking in this video. But I think because I am much more concentrated in the painting and analysing the reference picture than my English, I think I struggle a little bit to make my points and express what I want to say.
I realised that when I'm working, I'm going to make sure to keep that highlight from the nose. That when I'm working with watercolors, you see me kind of cleaning my brush a lot, but I don't use that much water to clean my brushes. I only use water whenever I want to swap colors, whenever I change the color that I'm working with. But normally when I am trying to fix a mistake or I'm trying to overwork certain areas, I don't put my brush in water. I only dab the excess paint out of the brush. Sorry that you can't see my water. Just can't really mix. Can't really put anything else in the frame. But yeah, I just want to focus on the palette, the paper, and maybe check whenever I am drying my brush. It is very important for you to understand how much water we are working with. Obviously, we need to get our brushes wet because we wouldn't be able to work with watercolors if our medium wasn't water. But I try and paying attention to the amount of water I'm using, not to be very excessive, because then, as I said, it's becoming a bit too unpredictable. I'm gonna go with this pink. I'm gonna use a little bit of yellow, very light yellow, just to get a bit less pinkish. I'm gonna go on top of this shadow here and make it look more pink.
I think it is extremely important to be patient in these first stages of the portrait. It's very easy to be carried away and trying to work quicker than the medium allows you to. So make sure not to put too much colour, too much water. Everything will look smudged and dirty, so be patient.
I'm doing the same ochre, it's looking more orangey as a undertone, because I realise that it's going to be a great way to just add saturation to a shadow, just using a bright ochre. To blend, I stick my brush in water. I don't scribble, I just do this. And then I dab the excess water out. Something that I don't like about my watercolors is that you can see a lot of harsh edges. It looks organic, but I'm going for a more geometric result. That's why I'm trying to be a bit careful with my edges. The tendency, this is important to understand, the tendency of watercolor when you do a stain, as you can see perfectly in this example that we were swapping in a minute, you can see that the normal thing with watercolor when you do a plain stain is that the water will sort of spread and the pigment will be collected in the edge of the water stain. So you will have a pretty smooth surface, but in the edge you'll have a harsh line. So Sorry about that. We're already seeing this while it's drying. As you can see, this edge, it's becoming very, very cut. You can see that line that I was talking about. I think it's going to be easier if we let it dry and go on top with it. I think I'm going to actually just figured out that the shadow here looks a bit more green. So I'm just going to go straight with this bluish green. And I'm using a yellow as a gradient.
I recommend trying different blending techniques with watercolor. As you can see, I tend to do sort of a dry blending technique. So I put my stain, or either I spread it until there's no more pigment nor water, or I get my brush drier and drier until it's just spreadable with the bristles of the brush.
Okay, I got some this magenta, I mixed it with that lime green. I'm gonna keep adding darker values here around the eyes. Whoops. I went too far with the water, so I'm trying to.
I'm pretty sure the most complicated thing for beginner artist or trying to get your portraits to a next level, it's not really understanding value and color and just finding the way to sculpt your face in a way that it looks realistic. I think this comes with practice, and believe me, at the beginning of the painting is the most hard part because you're not used to this reference picture. You need to analyze before you get started, and believe me, by the end of the painting you will find it much more detailed, and it will be easier to find information about it.
I think I got to a point that I know the behavior and the anatomy of the face well enough for me to sort of be more intuitive, like not only be my painting based on what I see in the reference picture, but with what I already know. So if you need more time to figure it out, it doesn't matter. The important thing is you only understand what's happening in the picture. Trying to decide if I want to do the same sort of finish look with the whole painting, or if I want to give my own sort of style that I'm trying to incorporate in my paintings. I like my paintings to look somewhere finished. With this, what I mean is that even though I prioritize like main features, I leave certain areas unpainted. So here I think I'm gonna do the lips as something that it looks unfinished. Not sure how I'm gonna manage this, but I think I'm gonna try. So maybe I should kind of smudge this line in between both upper and bottom lip and just pay attention to the corners. That's something that I normally do with my own paintings. Let's see how it looks if I do that. The way they taught us at uni to paint, not only a portrait but any kind of painting, was by going from general to detail. So we would do a first layer in general for the painting and then slowly add more and more information without specifying in a certain area. And I think that's a great thing to do with watercolor because you can't really focus in one single area. You need to let it dry and then continue. So jumping from one place to another, I guess. I'm going to use a bit more cadmium yellow to bring that corner down. Here we can see there's a highlight near the corner, and as you can see, this shadow sort of goes down a little bit. It's not too subtle. It's very subtle, sorry, but you can see the difference between this highlight and this shadow, that tone. So I'm gonna try and do that with this cadmium yellow, leaving this part as a sort of highlight. Okay, I mixed cadmium yellow with pink. Again, if you think it's way too saturated, make sure if it well, I think this is a case with my paper. Make sure if it happens the same thing with yours, but it will dry much lighter and less saturated than you expect. Okay, I think that looks a bit too orange. I'm gonna dab the excess. Do go again with a different color, a bit more pink. Here I'm doing the wet on wet technique. I try different techniques, I think, during the whole process of my paintings. Unintentionally, I just go with what I have. So here I was trying to do a dry on wet technique, but because I was not satisfied with the result, I dabbed the excess water out. I was erasing my mistake, and then because the surface was already very wet, I did the wet on wet technique. Here I'm mixing a bit of ochre too with that leftover green that I had. Okay, I'm gonna go on top with this nose shadow. I'm starting out with a very pink colour as sort of a edge. And now I am doing a green. more yellow. If you think it's a bit too green, I recommend adding a little bit of magenta purple to the mix. It will warm it up a lot. Now I'm just gonna continue this shadow. Something that I recommend if you don't want to cut clean edges in your unified shadow, even though you need more paint, try and spread the stain as far as the pigment will get. So just spread it around, even though it's barely making anything. Just keep going until there's no more paint in your brush. Okay, I think I screwed it a little bit with this green. I think it's just, I think there need to be more highlight in there. So I'm gonna overwork the surface here, see if I can get rid of some of the color around it. No, not doing much. I'm gonna leave it that way. Now to blend, I just got the brush a tiny bit wet, just the tip of the brush, got the excess water out. And I'm gonna smudge the edge I want to blend slowly. When that is done, you can't really go on top with it because your brush is too, has a lot of paint. You're gonna get excess of more color. That's it. Gonna do the same thing in the other side. Gonna start with a darker version, this purple. Okay, now I'm not gonna dip my brush this time because I think I don't have that much color left in my brush. And I'm gonna blend. This dry technique leaves a texture to the paint that I really like, kind of little dots, but I think that's because of the texture of the brush, of the paper, sorry. I'm gonna go with the green. Even though it doesn't look green, I like adding contrast colors just to bring more interest into the portrait. Okay, I think I'm gonna add more contrast, give more details to the nose. I'm gonna go deeper with the green, maybe add a little bit of purple. this shadow, I see that the edge is darker than the middle. Add a bit more yellow to the mix. Again, I'm gonna get my brush wet, get the excess water out, and blend this green to that same stain just on top of the lip, leaving the middle a bit lighter. This darker. I think the bigger the brush, the more water will absorb, so the more careful you need to be with the excess water mistake. Okay, I think it's time for me to add more contrast into this shadow underneath. So I'm mixing yellow with maybe a bit of this. Yeah, I like that colour. Maybe mix it with a bit more purple because I think it's looking a bit too yellow. I'm gonna do purple. Don't know why I haven't done it sooner. Okay, this looks a bit messy. I think it has no cohesiveness, but I think it's fine. It's okay. Isn't awful. Got a green to make contrast between the shadow projected from the tip of the nose and the actual nose. So I'm gonna wait it to dry for me to do it. And this also I should wait for it to dry. I'm gonna grab my small brush to do the eyes. Wow, so thin. Let's continue with the eyes. Just doing a red line here in the corner. Doesn't really look red, but I am doing that as an undertone. I hope that you can't hear the fan that I have like half a meter away from me. I make sure to keep it very silent because here in Spain I can't really afford painting in a closed room without ventilation and with the blinds, the curtains, not in the dark. Here in Spain it's very common for houses to stay shut during the day and open up during the night because it's so hot at the moment that you can't really, if you don't have air conditioning, you really need to isolate yourself from the light. So yeah, trying to survive the usual daily 40 degrees Celsius. Okay, I'm gonna do ultramarine for the eyeshadow. I want to keep certain areas kind of small highlights. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that. to get rid of the excess paint out. And that is a light blue. Mix a little bit of purple just to get a more ultramarine color. Oops. Clean out your corner of my palette. I should actually wait to do that because I can screw it very easily. So I'm going to wait for it to dry to keep doing the eyelid. I'm going to keep adding that pink in the nose. Now back to my bigger brush. It's getting harder to work with such a small brush. Add a bit more pink. What I'm going to do with the lips is, rather than keeping a nice edge between the lip and the highlight here, I think I'm going to try and make it look a bit more smooth, more blended. A bit more blush. I'm going to spread that edge, the corner of the lips, down. And go back to my small brush because it's getting harder to get the details right. I think it's better, because I don't have any masking liquid, I think I'm gonna go on top of the highlights and then later on simply add some white gouache. I know this is meant to be 100% a watercolor painting, but yeah, I should have said it in the beginning. I'll make a voiceover on top so you know where to keep those highlights. If you can use masking tape, use it. If you don't even want the highlight to begin with, it's fine. But if you want the highlight to stay, make sure to put some masking tape on top. Masking tape, no, masking liquid on top, so you don't ruin that clean highlight in the eyes. I'm gonna create a nice gradient color of a yellow for this shadow on top of the, like in between the eyebrows. These are meant to be sort of the eyebrows, but I'm not sure if it's the lightning or the makeup. It seems like they disappeared. I'm just gonna do a very subtle shadow there. I'm gonna pick a orange or I could do a quicker thing, which is a gradient. Make it sort of blend until so a gradient between the dark and light. Let's see how it turns out. I want the main focus to be obviously the features. That's why I'm making decisions like this one. Because even though I still think I need to add color to the top of the head, especially because it's shadow, I still believe it should be more impulsive. Really? There we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to wait for it to dry to give a darker layer on top. Here I'm gonna do sort of the under eye shadow a bit thicker, more defined. Gonna go with yellow here. Just mixing a lot of colors to make an almost undefined value. A bit more yellow. So I realized that I tend to oversaturate my painting a lot, and because I want to keep the main focus on the features, there's really no point of bringing a super saturated color here in the top of the head. So I'm just gonna mix. I just mixed a lot of colors together to have a neutral, somehow warm color, not really defined what color it is. I'm slowly blending it. I'm gonna have a pink line just on top of that blue. And actually I need to get rid of this highlight here. Gonna blend it upwards. I think one of the mistakes that I'm doing with this portrait is, even though I do like the yellow base, I think the reference picture is much more contrasted. I think the shadows should be much darker. I think it's kind of losing the potential that it could have. Also, not only because of the color of the paper itself, which is not pure white, but also because we are working in a yellow base. I think I should have went a bit harder with the pink or the reds. Even bring a little bit more blues in the equation. I don't know, I think it just needs a bit more contrast. Also, I completely forgot about sort of the fake eyelashes that she's wearing in the bottom. The sorry, eyelash line. I don't know how we say that, but I don't know. I think it gives her a bit of direction in her eyes, like as if she was looking down. I don't know. I think it's looking nice like this. I think I didn't want it to look too creepy. But yeah, I completely forgot. If you want to add it, you're completely free to do it. And maybe if you're not sure if it will look good, maybe try making it with a very light blue, and if you're not happy, try and dab it with paper before it dries out. Make this part light, darker, sorry. I don't know if you noticed, but I hardly ever, well, correction, I never use black in watercolor. I've incorporated very lately in my oil paintings, but no, I don't use black. I remember when I first started painting that I got to the conclusion that whenever I tried adding too much black, my paintings would look too dirty. So I rather mix a bunch of colors together and had a little hue to it than going straight with black. Just gives a very grayish undertone. I don't like it. I'd rather use that, or mixing a lot of colors together, or going straight to Prussian blue or indigo blue or something very deep. Nope, 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 nope. Okay, for the nose, I realized that I want to keep the highlight here so that you can see a clean contrast between this shadow here and the highlight from the nose. So I think I have to do two things. Those things, I was going to say. Two things. I have to darken up this area. So I'm going on top with a bit more green and pink, just to make it more neutral. Sometimes the best way to neutralize a color is mixing it with the complementary color. Okay. Nice, we need a nice cut in the edge of the nostril. Okay, sorry, I didn't really talk about any theory that I have. Well, color theory, basics of color. I'm not quite sure at the moment about the complementary colors. I do know the primary and the secondary and the terciarios. I don't know how to say it in English, but I do recommend looking at the color wheel just in case you want to know how to mix certain colors to get other colors, and about the neutralizing other colors with the complementary. I think it's the complementary of blue is orange, the complementary color of purple is yellow, and for red it's green, but not 100% sure. Make the nostrils a bit darker. There needs to be another contrast here. That's why I'm darkening it with a little bit of green. I think I'm not going to add too much more too much details. Or maybe I should do ultramarine blue for the whole eye. I decided to do the eyes in black. Thing that well, black it's not, as I said, it's not completely black, that ultramarine blue. Because I thought it could add a nice contrast with the rest of the face, because even though there's very harsh shadows, I think it stayed less contrasted than what I expected. So that touch of blue eyeshadow with the black of the eyes, I think that could give a nice contrast to the general value of the painting. I'm going to do an even darker colour. Do sort of the pupil. Am I happy with it? I'm not sure. I don't know what to do with the eyes. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna give it a tiny touch of highlight in the eyes and maybe some in the lips, and I think I'm done. It doesn't look like a finished painting, but with the time that I have, can't really do a full glam painting. But I think you get the picture of what I do to get my portraits to work. If I were you and I had enough time, I would have painted the hair pink with kind of a nice orange. I don't know. Maybe I should try just a tiny bit, actually just a tiny touch. No, I think it will get this. I think it will just not work. I would love to paint the background, but I'm not sure what color should I paint it. Should I paint it? No, I think I'm gonna leave it this way. Let me think. Oh, and I finally decided not to add any background because I think a background is to do like a full painting. Normally when I want to do a portrait study, I normally don't do any background. But whenever I do the background, it's because I spend several hours in a portrait, and I think it has enough contrast for being able to support a background. I think that if it's very subtle, and yeah, if it's subtle, especially with watercolor, adding a background is just gonna ruin that. I don't know. I ruined a lot of nice studies with a very horrible background, so no, not gonna happen today. I'm gonna blend this a little bit more, a little bit better, and I think I'm done. I thought about adding the hairs. Yes, I think I'm gonna add the hairs, but I firstly need to wait for it to dry, so just 1 second. Oh, and I'm actually gonna add the highlights in the eyes while I wait for it to dry. This is white gouache, by the way. Don't know if I specified what I used to do highlights. Please make sure the paint, the surface you're painting in, is completely dry, because it will be ruined if it's wet and you go on top with gouache. It will smudge everything up. So yes, be careful. The highlights are well located. Because we are working on a undertone painting, the good thing is that the white really shows. You can even fix certain mistakes. I went too far with the pink. I wanted to keep this as a highlight. I think that's it. Make sure I have enough paint. While I wait the forehead to dry and give that hair a little more detail, I'm just adding a bit more depth to the hair. You're free to leave the same value with the hairs and the face, but I just thought it could give a bit more color to the general portrait. You don't have to do it. You don't even have to stop here. You can keep going. I only have like an hour and a half, so if you want to keep painting, you're completely free to do it. I'm actually quite excited to see your paintings and your interpretation. I hope that you found this useful, but I can really understand that people have their own personal way of painting, and you can see that even when you're a beginning artist, when you're beginning to paint. So yeah, encouraged you to take it with your own palette and with your own way of interpreting a portrait. Okay, this was not dry enough, so I'm going to leave it a bit more to dry. This looks awful. No, can't do that. I'm gonna leave it to dry. Give that nice, clean hair. Actually, now that I'm looking at it at a distance, I think this looks a bit too obnoxious. Obnoxious? That's not the right word. But I think it's just too showy. I think it's a bit too saturated. Just there in the middle, can't really not see it. So I'm gonna go on top with a purple just to make everything more cohesive. That's it. It wasn't too hard. Okay, now that it's dry, I'm gonna paint the hair once again. I'm gonna do a purple, and now I'm gonna add a ochre. I think you need to take the opportunity of letting certain areas dry to get away, have a walk, look something else, because after spending an hour and a half looking at the reference picture and the painting, it's normal your eyes to get like used to it. So it's a very good thing to stand up and just not look at your painting for a few minutes at least, so you can go back and look at it with more like fresher eyes. And you could even find a lot of mistakes that you wouldn't have seen if it wasn't for that little walk. So yeah, I encourage you to stop the recording somewhere in the middle and then keep going. There we go. Because I see it a little bit simple, I'm just going to add a bit of blush. Whoa. And that is exactly what happens when I apply blush to myself. Okay, I think I'm not going to paint any background. I hope you enjoyed and that you could learn something new with this class. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.